In the annals of modern scandal, few cases have generated more public intrigue than that of Jeffrey Epstein, the disgraced financier whose network of power, wealth, and alleged criminal activity has captivated the world since his arrest in 2019. But as millions of documents from the Epstein files are released to the public in 2025 and 2026, a new question emerges. Could this case, centered on sex trafficking and abuse, actually threaten global financial stability? Today, we're diving deep into the intersection of scandal, power, and economics. This is the story of how one man's crimes could ripple through the world's financial systems, and what history tells us about the economic impact of high-profile scandals involving the world's elite. To understand the potential economic implications, we first need to understand what the Epstein files actually are, and the unprecedented transparency effort surrounding them. Jeffrey Epstein died in a Manhattan jail cell in August 2019 while awaiting trial on federal sex trafficking charges. His longtime associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, was later convicted in 2021 and sentenced to 20 years in prison. But the story was far from over. In January 2024, public interest surged when a judge unsealed court documents from a 2015 defamation case against Maxwell. The documents contained names of prominent individuals, though most information was already publicly known. The real transparency push began in 2025. In November of that year, Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act with overwhelming bipartisan support, 427 votes to 1 in the House, and unanimous approval in the Senate. President Donald Trump signed it into law on November 19, 2025. The act required the Department of Justice to release all Epstein-related files within 30 days. On December 19, 2025, the initial release began, but it was incomplete, drawing bipartisan criticism. On January 30, 2026, the Justice Department released what it described as more than 3.5 million pages of documents, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images. These files came from multiple sources: the Florida and New York cases against Epstein, the New York case against Maxwell, investigations into Epstein's death, FBI investigations, and Office of Inspector General reviews. According to the Department of Justice, over 500 attorneys and reviewers contributed to processing these documents. The files revealed email correspondence between Epstein and powerful individuals, including business leaders, politicians, and philanthropists. They included flight logs from his private planes, photographs from his properties, financial records, and victim testimonies. Notably, the Justice Department concluded in July 2025 that no client list existed, contrary to widespread speculation. The released documents mention numerous prominent figures from business, politics, entertainment, and academia. It's crucial to emphasize, being mentioned in these files does not indicate wrongdoing. Many individuals appeared simply because they attended the same events, traveled on the same flights, or had professional correspondence with Epstein during his years as a financier. The files reference former presidents, business executives, scientists, academics, and celebrities. Flight logs showed various individuals traveled on Epstein's private aircraft over the years. Email correspondence revealed professional and social connections spanning decades. Among the business figures mentioned are tech entrepreneurs, hedge fund managers, real estate developers, and financial executives. The emails show Epstein maintained relationships with former Treasury officials and prominent investors. Some correspondence dates back to the 1990s and early 2000s, before his 2008 conviction on solicitation charges. The documents also revealed that in September 1996, nearly a decade before Epstein's first arrest, survivor Maria Farmer complained to the FBI about his crimes. According to the files, officials failed to take immediate investigative steps, raising serious questions about law enforcement response. What makes these revelations potentially economically significant isn't just the names, it's the positions these individuals held in the global financial system, corporate governance structures, and regulatory frameworks. To understand whether the Epstein files could trigger economic disturbance, we must examine history. Financial markets don't just respond to numbers, they respond to trust. And when that trust erodes through scandal, the consequences can be devastating. Let's start with Enron, In 2000, this energy giant's shares traded at over $90. By 2001, they were worth less than $1. The accounting scandal that concealed billions in debt didn't just destroy Enron. It wiped out $74 billion in shareholder value and took down Arthur Andersen, one of America's Big Five accounting firms. The scandal triggered the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, fundamentally reshaping corporate governance requirements. Or consider Lehman Brothers. When this 158-year-old institution collapsed in September 2008 with over $600 billion in debt, it didn't just end a company, it triggered a global financial crisis. The bankruptcy sent shockwaves through interconnected financial systems, froze credit markets, and contributed to the Great Recession. Bernie Madoff's $64.8 billion Ponzi scheme destroyed not just individual wealth, but institutional trust. When his fraud unraveled during the 2008 financial crisis, it devastated charities, pension funds, and individual investors who lost their life savings. The 2012 LIBOR scandal provides another crucial lesson. When it was revealed that major banks manipulated the London Interbank Offered Rate, a benchmark affecting over $350 trillion in derivatives and loans worldwide, the fallout included billions in fines and fundamental reforms to financial benchmarking systems. These cases share common threads. They involve trusted institutions, widespread harm to innocent parties, and systematic deception at the highest levels. The economic damage extended far beyond the immediate perpetrators, affecting employees, investors, creditors, and entire market sectors. Research published in the Journal of Business Research confirms that corporate failures from scandal have severe negative consequences for all stakeholders. The impact multiplies when scandals occur during economic stress or affect entire industries, leading to contagion effects across countries and sectors, increased unemployment, reduced tax revenue, and higher poverty rates. Financial markets operate on trust. When investors lose confidence in the integrity of corporate leadership, regulatory oversight, or financial institutions themselves, capital flows change dramatically. Consider what happens when scandal breaks. First, there's immediate stock price volatility as investors reassess risk. Companies associated with the scandal see share prices plummet, sometimes by 90% or more, as occurred with Steinhoff International in 2017 when its CEO resigned amid revelations of financial irregularities. Second, there's a broader credibility crisis. The 2009 Satyam scandal in India, which involved $1.5 billion in overstated profits, didn't just destroy one company. It eroded investor confidence in Indian companies broadly and led to increased scrutiny of corporate governance across the country's business sector. Third, scandal triggers regulatory response. After Enron and WorldCom, Congress passed Sarbanes-Oxley, imposing new audit requirements and executive certification standards. These regulatory changes impose real costs on businesses, compliance expenses, reporting requirements, and operational constraints. Fourth, there are litigation cascades. Shareholders file lawsuits. Class actions proliferate. Legal costs mount. Enron's bankruptcy triggered a $40 billion shareholder lawsuit. These legal battles tie up resources and create uncertainty for years. The Epstein case involves a different kind of scandal, not accounting fraud or financial manipulation, but criminal abuse and trafficking. Yet the trust dynamics remain similar. If prominent business leaders are revealed to have enabled, ignored, or benefited from criminal activity, investor confidence in their judgment, ethics, and fiduciary responsibility can evaporate. How exactly could the Epstein files translate into economic disturbance? Let's examine the potential transmission channels. First, there's the corporate leadership crisis. If business leaders named in the files face investigations, lawsuits, or criminal charges, it creates leadership uncertainty. Companies may face sudden executive departures. Board members may resign. This leadership vacuum during a crisis can paralyze decision-making and strategic planning. When a CEO or chairman steps down amid scandal, shareholder value often declines significantly. Research shows that corporate misconduct announcements result in average stock price declines of 6 to 7% immediately upon revelation, and that's for garden-variety governance failures, not criminal allegations. Second, there's the institutional investor response. Major pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and endowments increasingly apply environmental, social, and governance criteria to investment decisions. If prominent fund managers or corporate directors are implicated in enabling abuse, institutional investors face enormous pressure to divest. This isn't theoretical. In October 2025, following revelations in the Epstein files, King Charles III stripped Prince Andrew of his remaining royal titles and evicted him from his residence. If royal families respond to reputational risk this dramatically, imagine how fiduciary-bound institutional investors might react. Third, there's regulatory and legal exposure. Companies whose leaders face investigation may encounter enhanced regulatory scrutiny of their businesses. SEC investigations, DOJ inquiries, and international regulatory reviews can freeze corporate activity, limit strategic options, and impose massive legal costs. The legal exposure extends beyond individuals. If corporate resources, facilities, or relationships facilitated illegal activity, companies themselves may face civil liability. Discovery processes could reveal uncomfortable truths about corporate governance failures. Fourth, there's market confidence and contagion. Financial markets price information rapidly. If revelations suggest widespread elite complicity in criminal activity, it could trigger broader questions about governance quality across public companies. This contagion of doubt can spread beyond directly implicated firms to entire sectors. The 2008 financial crisis demonstrated how rapidly contagion spreads. When trust collapsed in mortgage-backed securities, it spread to the institutions that held them, then to their counterparties, and ultimately to the entire financial system. Now let's consider why the Epstein files might not trigger significant economic disruption. First, there's the possibility that information is already priced in. Financial markets are forward-looking. By February 2026, when the bulk of files were released, much was already known or suspected. Court documents were unsealed in 2024. Media investigations had been ongoing for years. If markets haven't reacted dramatically yet, it suggests investors have already incorporated this risk. Second, this case involves no systemic financial fraud. The Epstein case, however heinous, doesn't involve the type of financial fraud that directly undermines market infrastructure. It's not Enron hiding debt, or Lehman over-leveraging assets, or Madoff running a Ponzi scheme. The financial system's technical operation isn't compromised. Third, we're looking at individual versus institutional failure. Unlike Enron or Lehman, where entire institutions collapsed, the Epstein files primarily implicate individuals. Modern corporate governance includes succession planning, board oversight, and institutional continuity. One executive's departure, while disruptive, rarely destroys a well-run company. Fourth, there's diversification and market depth to consider. Global markets are vast and diversified. Even if several major companies face leadership crises simultaneously, they represent a small fraction of global market capitalization. The S&P 500 alone contains 500 companies. International markets contain thousands more. Fifth, we have strong current economic fundamentals. Economic impact from scandal is amplified during periods of existing stress. The Madoff scheme collapsed amid the 2008 crisis. The Epstein files are being released during relatively strong employment, moderate inflation, and stable banking sectors, at least as of early 2026. Even if direct market impact is limited, indirect economic effects could still emerge. Consider political instability and policy uncertainty. The files have already triggered political responses, congressional investigations, executive branch reviews, and international inquiries create policy uncertainty. When government focuses on scandal rather than economic policy, it can delay important decisions on taxation, regulation, and spending. There are also international relations and trade to consider. If the files implicate leaders or prominent citizens of multiple countries, diplomatic tensions could emerge. Trade relationships depend partly on trust between national leaders. Strained relations can translate into trade policy changes, tariff adjustments, or investment restrictions. Then there's philanthropy and development finance. Epstein had connections to numerous philanthropic organizations and foundations. If major donors or foundation leaders face reputational damage, charitable giving might decline. In developing countries reliant on foundation support for health, education, and infrastructure, this could have real economic consequences. We also face the risk of regulatory overreaction. Historical pattern suggests scandal often triggers regulatory overcorrection. Sarbanes-Oxley, while addressing real problems, imposed substantial compliance costs on all public companies. If the Epstein files prompt sweeping new regulations on corporate behavior, business operations, or financial oversight, compliance costs could affect economic growth. We're witnessing the rise of what some call the accountability economy, where corporate reputation, ethical behavior, and social responsibility increasingly affect market value. Environmental, social, and governance investing has grown from niche consideration to mainstream requirement. By 2025, ESG-focused funds managed over $30 trillion globally. The G in ESG, governance, includes executive conduct, board oversight, and corporate culture. If the Epstein files reveal governance failures at major companies, boards that ignored red flags, executives who prioritized relationships over ethics, or cultures that enabled bad behavior, ESG investors will respond. Fund managers answerable to pension beneficiaries, university endowments, and sovereign wealth funds cannot ignore systemic governance failures. Unlike past scandals that unfolded through traditional media, the Epstein files are being dissected in real time across social media platforms. Public pressure campaigns, boycott movements, and activist investor demands can mobilize rapidly. Modern corporations are acutely sensitive to reputational risk. When consumers demand accountability, when employees question leadership, when investors face constituent pressure, companies respond, often by changing leadership, restructuring boards, or implementing new governance standards. In competitive labor markets, particularly for high-skilled workers, corporate reputation matters. Companies implicated in enabling abuse may struggle to recruit top talent. The Great Resignation phenomenon demonstrated workers' willingness to leave organizations that don't align with their values. The Epstein case is inherently international. He held properties in multiple countries. His associates spanned continents. The economic implications follow these global connections. The file's implications for Prince Andrew led to unprecedented royal action. King Charles III's decision to strip his titles reflects reputational risk management at the highest levels. The British monarchy, while ceremonial, plays important roles in trade promotion, diplomatic relations, and soft power. The Commonwealth comprises 56 nations with combined GDP exceeding $13 trillion. Royal scandals can affect Britain's trade relationships, investment flows, and diplomatic effectiveness across these nations. Epstein's financial operations involved numerous offshore jurisdictions. If the files reveal how he moved money internationally, it could trigger enhanced scrutiny of banking secrecy regimes, tax havens, and wealth management practices. Following the Panama Papers in 2016, we saw how financial revelations prompt international regulatory cooperation. The OECD's Common Reporting Standard, which requires automatic exchange of financial account information between countries, was strengthened in response to such scandals. The files mention connections to prominent tech entrepreneurs and investors. The technology sector's valuation depends heavily on growth narratives and founder credibility. If tech leaders face sustained reputational damage, it could affect their company's access to capital, strategic partnerships, and regulatory treatment. Financial history provides crucial lessons about scandal and economic impact. First, context is everything. The same scandal produces different outcomes depending on economic context. During boom times, markets absorb scandal more easily. During downturns, scandal can accelerate decline. Lehman's collapse mattered more because it occurred amid an existing crisis. Second, timing matters. Rapid revelation can shock markets. Gradual disclosure allows adjustment. The Epstein files are being released over time, allowing markets to absorb and price information incrementally rather than experiencing a single shock. Third, attribution is complex. When economic downturns follow scandal, establishing causation is difficult. Did Enron cause the 2001-2002 recession? Did Lehman cause the 2008 crisis? Or were they symptoms of underlying problems? Economic historians debate these questions still. Fourth, reform often outlasts crisis. Scandals produce regulatory changes that reshape business practice for decades. Sarbanes-Oxley, Dodd-Frank, and similar reforms impose ongoing costs and constraints. The Epstein files may ultimately matter more for governance reform than immediate market impact. Fifth, justice delayed as impact diminished. Epstein died in 2019. Many revelations concern conduct from the 1990s and 2000s. The passage of time reduces economic impact. Companies have changed leadership. Boards have turned over. Organizational memory fades. Justice may come, but market consequences often don't. So, could the Epstein files case affect the world economy and lead to financial disturbances? The honest answer is, it's possible, but not inevitable. And if it does, the magnitude will likely be moderate rather than catastrophic. Direct financial contagion seems unlikely. The files don't reveal systematic financial fraud that undermines market infrastructure. They don't expose hidden corporate debts or manipulated accounting. They don't trigger bank runs or credit freezes. What they do expose is ethical failure, governance breakdown, and the ways wealth and power can enable abuse. These revelations can and should prompt serious questions about corporate oversight, board responsibility, and executive accountability. The economic impact will depend on several factors. How many prominent business leaders face serious legal jeopardy? How do institutional investors respond? What regulatory changes emerge? How resilient are the implicated companies' succession plans and governance structures? More fundamentally, the Epstein case forces a reckoning with how our economic system evaluates leadership. For decades, we've measured executives primarily by financial performance, share price, earnings growth, return on investment. The accountability economy demands we also measure ethics, judgment, and character. This shift, from purely financial metrics to broader stakeholder considerations, represents a fundamental change in capitalism itself. The Epstein files may accelerate this transition, making corporate governance, ethical conduct, and social responsibility not just nice-to-have features, but essential components of market valuation. History suggests financial markets are remarkably resilient to scandal when underlying economic fundamentals remain sound. But history also teaches that trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild. And in our interconnected global economy, trust isn't just a moral virtue, it's an economic asset. The true cost of the Epstein case may not appear in stock prices or GDP figures. It may appear in the slower, quieter erosion of faith in institutions, the cynicism about elite accountability, and the breakdown of trust that makes modern economic cooperation possible. As these millions of documents continue to be analyzed, as investigations proceed, and as the full scope of this scandal becomes clear, we'll be watching two questions. Will justice be served? And will our economic institutions prove strong enough to withstand the revelations and emerge reformed? Only time will provide the answers. But the questions themselves remind us that economics is never just about numbers. It's about trust, integrity, and the social bonds that make markets possible in the first place.